Will Height, the designated broker, and Shannon Hall is here with me as well. We're going to be hosting it together tonight. As is doesn't mean you are safe. We're going to be talking about some real life scenarios where we were representing, Best Choice Realty was representing the buyer and Best Choice Realty was representing the seller. And we're going to learn from these are recent case scenarios about disclosures and inspections and kind of how to navigate all of that tonight. So I'm excited about tonight's topic because these are situations that were handled and they came to a conclusion and there was a solution for these items. So let's go to the next slide. So Shannon, why don't you talk about Form 17, how that works and what buyers are acknowledging? Because the first one we're going to talk about, I believe, is a buyer, a situation that came up last week.
Yeah, so I mean, just basics. This is for our newer agents. So Form 17 is the seller disclosures for Washington State that every seller has to provide, and we'll go into which ones are exempt from that. But in essence, the buyer has to do their due diligence to review those seller disclosures, and they have the chance to review it and potentially back out unless they have signed and agreed otherwise. So they're looking to see if there's any sort of discrepancy, if every box was checked, if there was any sort of knowledge that doesn't seem right, things like that.
Before you go, Shannon, there's a section, I don't know if you guys have actually read this, but I think Candace, I actually sat through a contract negotiation class last week with some of you. And look at that on section C, it says buyer acknowledges that pursuant to RCW, real estate licensees are not liable for inaccuracies provided by seller, except for the extent that the real estate licensees knows of the inaccurate information. That's where you guys can get yourself into trouble. So if you, for example, and I'll go into it, you have knowledge of it, and then the deal cancels, but you are aware of this material issue, you are responsible. You could lose your license if you are not properly communicating and disclosing material defects with the contracts or the properties that you're working on. So you're not out of the clear.
So if you're walking around the house as a listing agent, you're walking around the house and you notice that there's a broken seal on the window, you notice that there's a scratch on the hardwood floors underneath the carpet, or you notice other kind of material defects, the seller's told you circumstances that there was mold remediation done in the attic, but nothing was listed in the Form 17, you have a duty to make sure you review that Form 17A, make sure it's 100% filled out. They didn't miss a box, but then also they didn't miss any of that information that needs to be included in their disclosures.
Okay. So, and if those of you are from Idaho, it's no different in Idaho. You still have a duty to disclose material defects. So you're not off the hook. Depending on which state you're working out of.
Some people too, so I'm going to go down to section E here, buyer, which term includes all persons signing. There's additional, sometimes on the Form 17, some people think, sellers especially, they think that they're limited to that little space. As a buyer's agent, I love it when the seller, they have additional pages, they got additional supplements. It means that there is that care, that level of care and pride and ownership that they've had in their home, that they were very detailed. It's a good sign as a buyer's agent to have some of that. So if sellers say, oh my gosh, this is a pain to go through. Yes, it's painful, but it's the one thing that will hold after the close of escrow where a buyer can come back and say, uh-oh, seller did not disclose. They had knowledge of this plumbing leak or this mold remediation or all these things that they could potentially find after the sale.
Yeah, and so you gotta watch some of the things that come up. Let's go into it so you can see. But before we do, I want to make sure that you realize that they're provided by the seller based on the seller's actual knowledge of the property at the time that the seller completes the disclosure. So what we're going to talk about with one of the cases tonight is that we represented a seller and we became aware of something that happened after the disclosures. So what does that mean? Do we have to redisclose? We're going to talk about that as well. But this pretty much tells you that the seller is responsible for the time of when they disclose.
Yeah.
and whether we need to redisclose on that.
And real quick too on that too, some, especially new agents, they think, yes, you have a duty to review the Form 17, but you're not the one completing the Form 17. So in essence, you can't help the seller fill it out, but you can verify and say, oh, we noted that crack in the pavement. We need to make sure that that's included. That broken seal, we need to make sure that's in your disclosures too. So we need to make sure it's complete, but we can't necessarily guide them on what to say.
People that are exempt, estates are exempt from disclosures. Bankruptcies in Washington are exempt from disclosures. And if Shannon and I were going to sell a property between the two of us, we're
blood relatives, basically. Mom
so
sells to the daughter, or sister sells to the sister.
they're exempt in Washington.
Yeah.
But there's very few times that they're exempt from disclosure law. And we've caught a lot of situations where people just need to be educated, and we're happy to jump in and support you. If you get in a situation where you're battling that, that's where we want you to pick up the phone and call the broker line. Call me directly, call Shannon, call any of the staff, and we will help you with navigating how to communicate with those people.
Yeah.
What
most common that people mix up is trusts. Trusts are not estates. Someone didn't necessarily die with a trust, so they're not technically exempt. They still have to fill out a Form 17. Now, do they have knowledge? That's the big question here. So here's a trust that we actually have.
It's a living trust, so they're not exempt from filling this out. And here you've got a very detailed, and it can be handwritten. In fact, I sometimes like it handwritten. I mean, it's nice to have it handwritten so the seller truly did take the time to fill in this disclosure and provided additional documents. In fact, we even provided an inspection, which became part of the disclosure as well. So if you're doing a pre-inspection,
there's no harm in a 20-page
Form
17.
Doing that. Yeah. So she even provided in 2A and 3, there was a water puddle in the driveway. It was determined the water was originating. They had some repairs done. It was the neighbor's line. So there was some detailed disclosure that was done. The reason we advise that they do this disclosure is because there was a contractor. There was a third party that came out to the property. So there would be some sort of record, and I'd hate to have our living trust having an issue after close of escrow because we did not disclose that there was a repair that was done, even if it was on our property, but it was not an issue with our property. So it's better to disclose than to conceal that kind of information.
Yeah, this is a question we get all the time. This one came up actually, I think, during our contract negotiation class the other day. So in a scenario where you are representing the seller and you have a buyer that does their inspection, in Washington, you have to have written permission from the seller in order to provide copies or portions or the full report to the seller of their inspection report. Now, in the case where buyer has supplied the
working, I assume you're getting.
Sorry, 1 second. We got to mute a couple lines here. In the case where we have an inspection report that was provided to the seller from the buyer, is the seller having to disclose that information that they now have knowledge on? Let's say that in this case, this is a 90-page buyer inspection report outlining all sorts of stuff. We've got caulking, we've got venting, we've got flashing. I mean, all sorts of different things that are on that inspection report. Does the seller have a duty to now disclose that to future home buyers? And I think the key on this is if you go back on the market, yeah, you have a duty to disclose. So maybe you want to have that as part of your disclosures. But usually in the case when you're negotiating your repairs and you're providing that inspection report to the seller, in many cases, you're trying to work it out so you can proceed to closing.
Okay, so we have the first case scenario that we have tonight. This is a commercial buyer. The commercial buyer is one of they've already done a walkthrough. They were on the final walkthrough, and they felt that the flooring is badly damaged, and it was not disclosed by the seller. And again, it's kind of one of those borderline things where it was like, okay, it's commercial. They had to remove some of those like an entry level, like kind of a front desk type of situation. When they removed the front desk, there was some little holes that connected. I'll show you some pictures here in a minute. But basically the question is, okay, well, we waived our feasibility, we waived our inspection. Now we're just doing a final walkthrough, and the buyer is not happy and does not want to close because they feel like the seller should have disclosed that there was going to be holes in their flooring. And so these are the holes. You guys can take a look. The pictures always make it look worse. So when I got these pictures, I was like, okay, first off, it's like, I can see where they're upset about it, but is it reasonable? You know, is it reasonable to expect that the client would have disclosed that by removing that front desk that there would be holes in it? So again, that's the part where negotiation. Sometimes we get stuck with some of these things like this and we have to navigate. And in the case it was the day before closing that these pictures were taken.
Of course it is.
And the buyer was looking to us and to our agent for advice on what their options were. Now, if they've waived their disclosures, they've waived their Form 17, they waived their inspection, they waived their feasibility, and they're a day away from closing and they did a walkthrough, shame on them because they still have rights. They still could maybe terminate if they got themselves an attorney. But as we determined, the agent and I talked with the client, they wanted to continue on. So how do you proceed and protect yourself? Again, we always, at this stage in the game, always never text, always put it in writing. When I put it in writing, there's an email exchange between the buyer's agent and the listing agent. And we copy the respective designated brokers in the mix because it becomes very litigious after closing when things are not properly disclosed. So this is one where we did proceed to close and the buyers did buy as is, but they were cautioned to speak with an attorney prior to closing to make sure they understood their rights. Okay, and here's why. Section F in the purchase and sale agreement. So the seller has to maintain the property in its present condition. Is this normal wear and tear accepted? I mean, certainly that's where that old front desk would have been in the commercial space. It says normal wear and tear is accepted. So in this case, it's kind of that gray area where I don't know how it would play. Certainly something you want to make sure that you have provided in writing. Until the buyer has provided possession, the seller will repair or replace any system or appliance included but not limited to plumbing, heat. If something goes out, we're going to get into the fall here market pretty soon. So as things start to kind of,
Once the furnace kicks on for the season,
we start to see this a lot more, where something happens during that 30-day escrow period where we're waiting to close and something goes out. That's why it would be important to have a home warranty. We've talked about home warranties before. But then in like line 82, 81, it says buyer reserves the right to walk through the property within 5 days of closing to verify that the seller has maintained the property and the system and appliances as required in this paragraph. So again, it's in this paragraph. It doesn't mean that, oh, they didn't mow the lawn. Okay. Is that maintenance of the property and the systems as required by the paragraph. It doesn't specifically talk about the length of the lawn. No joke, you guys. I have had somebody call me and say the length is not the same. I measured the length of the lawn. No joke. This has happened. I could write a book about some of these crazies that are out there. So in this instance, you have to go with this is the paragraph in the purchase and sale agreement. And we have buyers doing walkthroughs right now and using the walkthrough as a way to renegotiate the contract. And I always have to draw the client and to sometimes our agents to this paragraph. It's section F in the purchase and sale agreement. You may want to read it or have your clients read it in its entirety to kind of alleviate some of the concerns you're running up against.
So this scenario that we have on the screen here, if you guys want to take a look at it, is the reverse of what we talked about.
Yeah.
So in essence, the buyer's agent got the same type of advice, after they did their final walkthrough, and they got the same kind of advice, put things in writing, right? But I
use ChatGPT.
I would argue that, when you put stuff in writing, I still would pick up the phone and call, because it does soften the blow on some of these things. And it does kind of start the conversation early. It does document the conversation, which I think is important, but then it's best to also deliver it through phone call as well.
Well, and then as the receiving end, so let's say I was the listing agent and I received this email from, say, Shannon today. It says during our final walkthrough, I love how they put the date, and it's also helpful to put the time. so that we can definitely see if it's within that 5-day window in Washington. So that the buyer observed visible water staining in the crawl space. Now, in this particular instance, they did not do an inspection. They went and did a walkthrough, but there was visible water standing. And so when we represented the seller, we were advising our sellers that yes, it was their responsibility to correct the visible water staining. However, they were biting off more than they can chew, you guys. This is sometimes how buyers work. They use their little chat GPT, and I think they pushed it too far. They were also asking for some necessary repairs before closing. And that's where our agent got visibly upset.
And a credit. And a credit. Let's not forget the credit as well.
And if you can't do that, we want a credit. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we dealt with this situation. Let's go to the next slide. So here's the visible standing water. So they did poke their head into the crawl space, and you can see that the water is there. Now, they didn't do an inspection. So, I mean, if we wanted to be jerks about it, we could say, well, the water was like that when you guys came through it. But our sellers were reasonable people. They don't want to be sued after escrow for not disclosing something. And it truly did come in after we had some rain and it just needed to be corrected. So they got a bid, they got a contractor out there. And so let's go to the next slide. I think I have one more on how we responded.
Yep, here's
Yeah.
no, we responded saying that we would do the necessary
We're gonna
repairs,
do the
and then we got this.
Yeah, so we said we'll do the crawl space, but then yeah, this is what the buyer's broker sent. Thank you for agreeing to make the necessary repairs. Please confirm in writing what will be repaired and how it resolves the issue. Who will perform the work? They're entitled to ask. We're going to do it and make it right, and the expected completion date on whether an escrow holdback is needed. For those of you who are newer to the business, an escrow holdback is used in instances like this, but they're used few and far between. We don't want to use them all the time because most lenders will not allow an escrow holdback. Some do, some don't. And so we want to make sure that our buyers have proper advice because we don't want to lose out on the deal. Sometimes we don't want to lose our earnest money. We don't want to put our earnest money at risk. And by introducing an escrow holdback on the 2 days before closing may not be smart unless we've talked with our lender. So I don't know whether this particular buyer's agent, because she's not with our firm, whether she was being properly advised or she was just getting this from Chat GPT. Again, be very careful when you're getting advice from Chat GPT because you got to make sure it's Washington related. You have to have practical knowledge. And a lot of times we have not trained the Chat GPT to actually help us in creating a proper response. And additionally noted during the final walkthrough, fogging glass, closet door in the second.
So the standing water wasn't enough. We've got more stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if these repairs are not completed in time, our buyer may include additional loan related costs. That's true. I mean, we're going to do the best to maintain our closing date. Once we have this, our clients can make an informed decision regarding closing. So all in all, there was areas where they had the ability to ask for what they asked for, that top section. Yes, you could ask for it, but additionally, they bit off more than they could chew. Let's go to the next slide. So the repairs, I want to bring this to your attention because if this buyer's agent had done an inspection, this would be a perfect opportunity 3 days prior to closing. It says right there in the Form 35 in Washington, 3 days prior to closing, they could have hired an inspector to come out and assess all of the things, the closet door that was not fixed. We had a situation, Shannon probably remembers this, where the seller just decided not to do any of the items. So in that case,
they agreed to it on a 35R, but then they ended up doing nothing.
So what do we do? As long as we have this paragraph in and we did an inspection, we could go back and hire an inspector at the same inspector that we hired at the beginning to come out and verify. And then we would cause that seller to essentially breach the contract and we would have options at that point in time to extend, to ask for credits, to have them perform on the contract. There are some other ways that we could handle it. But if you don't have an inspection and you waive the inspection, unfortunately, there's not much we can do except for to enact that clause that's already in the purchase and sale agreement, which is talking about the material defects that may happen windstorms that happen. I've had garage doors that have bent out of
The
shape.
well goes
The
out.
well goes out. Those types of things
Yeah.
would fall within disclosure issues that would be caught during a walkthrough, but not, the Mickey Mouse items that you should have asked for during
It's
inspection.
not a final walkthrough is not an operate. Yes, you're looking for some of those defects and things like that and items from your inspection, but it's not an opportunity to ask for improvements.
Right.
Um,
Okay, so the last thing we have for tonight, I know this is a lot on the screen, and if you need this.
If you need this later, let me know. I think really the point that we're trying to convey is that we've been seeing a lot of contracts, and this is not necessarily just our agents. This is a lot
across
of
the
agents out
industry.
there. They're just saying on maybe a 22D other or somewhere in the contract, they're just saying property to be sold as is, period. And that is all. So I think what I want to convey here is that proper as is language is not just that simple little sentence. There's a lot of other aspects that go into it. So, I mean, just knowing on this, the buyers acknowledge they've been advised to consult with an attorney prior to making their offer. Buyer understand that they cannot, real estate agents cannot provide legal advice. They're not qualified to advise, to interpret context of the addendum. I mean, all these different things that kind of prep it, but then also they'd have been advised that they can obtain inspections. And in essence, they've chosen and elected to not do that. So just know that there is more than just it to be sold as is. It is a paragraph of information
This
that you
part
can be
right
using.
here, I think is what it says. And the buyer shall be deemed to have agreed to buy the property in its present condition as is, but look at all the language
All around
all
it.
around it. It's a component, but it's not everything, and everything is needed. And our attorney has drafted this language. And so if you do need it and you do need the buyer and seller, they are advised to consult with their own attorney. Our attorney did draft this type of language and it has served us very well over the years, but you have to know when to use it and how to use it and make sure that that the buyer or the seller that you're representing has the proper disclosure, that you've given the disclosures and they understand that they should do inspections, they should do testing, they should check for the fitness of use and the habitability of the building or the property before they engage in this type of language. So, so I don't want to see the as is, no more Best Choice Realty putting as is. That's not the way we want to do it. Let's talk about how we want to convey that information.
Well, and also whether or not you want to have as is. There, I mean, with the type of market we're in, what's the harm in doing a 1-day inspection, 3-day inspection? I mean,
Right.
at the end of the day, if you are a seller and you get someone who's done a pre-inspection versus someone who's waived, I will take the pre-inspection all day long because they now have knowledge of every little working, fixture in this house versus the person who just says, I'm waived, and then something comes up during their final walkthrough and now they're back on the fence. I would much rather take the person who has knowledge of the house rather than one that does not.
Good point. Okay, so that's a wrap for us. There's some training opportunities we've got coming up. So, we're having some excellent sessions. Today's session was in North Idaho, actually, where Shannon and I are here in North Idaho with our group in Spokane and North Idaho for the next couple days. And awesome intake. Everybody's sharing what's working. We have some awesome deals coming together because we're all working together. We're sharing what's working. So if you have not attended one of our masterminds, we are working on getting one in King County that's coming up here in September or early October. So stay tuned for that.
Yep. Next week, Pierce County, we're on deck. So we'll see you
Yeah.
guys all this next week in Puyallup, I believe.
Yeah, and we've got we're going to do it at a listing too. So we're actually in the field for our next mastermind session. So
we're not at a desk, guys. We're going to walk around a house together. It'll be fun.
in the field. It'll be fun. All right. Any questions you guys have about disclosures or situations? I do have a few minutes that we can discuss anything you have. That's kind of rare for me to get through a session. Maybe it's because of you, Shannon.
Maybe,
We
could
got
be.
through the content quickly.
Candace, Virginia, did you guys get any kind of questions? Anything you wanted to add?
Virginia knows everything. She's very good.
No, I think it was great. I think that, we're seeing a lot of buyers. I'm helping an agent right now where they're not even in contract and they're like, well, yeah, no, they brought a contractor through and they're like, well, the roof is 15 years old. And I think setting expectations and I'll say this, setting expectations and having conversations with both sellers and buyers prior to going into any contract is going to save us a lot of grief. We
No,
hope.
that's great. That's a great point. We should probably added a whole slide on setting expectations, Virginia. It starts with how you talk to the people, right?
Mhm.
how you set it up. And if you just wait and you don't, what I call step into the punch, sometimes you're gonna get punched.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
and
hard time.
I'd say just what we're seeing in general right now, a lot of transactions are challenging.
Mhm.
And the ones that are not, there still are curveballs that are gonna come your way. You know, something that happens with keys or something that turns up on inspection or, you know, anything. There's any number of types of things that are coming your way right now. So, you're not alone, I think is what I want to tell you guys. You are not alone if you're having a transaction and something is just, you're like, I can't win today. It's
Yeah.
everybody's kind of feeling the same thing right now.
So, and remember, I was just standing in a kitchen with a buyer's agent that was under contract for my listing when the hot water heater fell through the floor. These
Oh,
things happen. You just have to smile and breathe.
yep. Yep.
No, not much you can do in that except get the contractor out and figure out.
We
I'm
solve
sure-
problems. I mean, this is in essence why we got our licenses is we're in the business to solve people's problems.
Yeah.
So we may not have an immediate gut reaction. It might take us a day, but we will get them a response.
All right, any other
Okay.
thoughts you guys have? Questions or comments, situations that you have not been able to encounter or wanted to know about the disclosures? For the most part, everybody's doing email disclosures. Somebody asked me about that. Yes, so disclosures, meaning the agency disclosures, the lead-based paint disclosures, 95% we're seeing that are disclosing by email. It's a separate email they send out, they attach the disclosures, or they create a quick select thing in transaction desk. That is how most top producers are getting their disclosures out.
I'm
So
also sending short sale disclosures automatically, just in case a listing goes into that.
great.
Yeah, you never know.
Good, good. Thank you, Stephen, for that. Appreciate it. Any other tips or tricks you guys are using?
I have one more thing, I suppose. Shameless plug, but we have our our Best Choice Realty Revive program that I think is helpful. So some of the circumstances that came up where we're trying to problem solve stuff that is now new knowledge, in the case where we had standing water, you know, if I were in the situation with a
Number
seller,
one, you take it off the market.
yeah,
and
that
deal
I mean,
with
if
it.
you're, yeah, if
You
you're still on the
attempt-
market, you take it off the market, do the repair, and then put it back on with a new listing. But if you're pending under contract, I would say, what's the harm in getting your sellers pre-approved with the Revive program, just in case something like that comes up on inspection during the final walkthrough, and maybe they don't have the cash wherewithal to do some of those repairs. They at least have that pre-approval for them to take care of some of those things. So shameless plug, but if you guys need access to the link, let me know. I can send it to you. Very easy to use. You can literally just scan a code and get the access to the funds within 24 hours. It's amazing. We've already had, I think, 4 or 5 people in the last week use it. It's amazing. They're really good success rate. I mean, people are really pleased, the agents that are using this.
Okay. All right. That's the wrap.
Okay. Thanks, you guys. It was nice to see you all. We'll see you next week, Pierce County.
See you later.